Hi.
Wow. Hello and welcome to the 2011 Sydney Writers' Festival on this beautiful day with this wonderful author. Chip Rowley, director of the festival, told me that it was this event that sold out fastest. And as somebody who has been an avid and long-time reader of David Mitchell's fiction, I understand and I agree with you. Let's begin at the beginning. David Mitchell was born in Merseyside in 1969 and grew up in Malvern in Worcestershire. He read English at the University of Kent and also an MA in Comparative Lit there as well?
Yeah, for my sins, yeah.
He's heard this before. He spent a year in Sicily and then went to Japan, where he spent 8 years teaching English and becoming the finest Anglo examiner and explainer of Japanese culture, even if that explanation was about his mystification since Lafcadio Hearn. His first...
Sure?
Let me draw the longbows. His first novel appeared in 1999. It was the strangest debut in post-war English fiction, with a couple of perhaps competitors. It consisted of 9 interlocking narratives. It moved in time and space with a kind of imaginative vibrancy and generosity, which was both a shock and a bracing introduction of a new voice into post-war Eng-Lit. He followed that up. I mean, he did do okay. I mean, I think he got the John Llewellyn Rhys Prize for First Novel, shortlisted for the Guardian First Book Award, but it wasn't. His reputation wasn't really firmly established until 2001's Number 9 Dream, when a young university student called Geordie Williamson was given his first fiction review, and in 600 words, buried in the back of the now defunct Australian Book Review, said it was a pretty cracking read. Our stars have been hitched together ever since. David has been shortlisted for the Booker Prize twice. He has won numerous other prizes and has a simultaneous life outside of the prize culture as a reader who is read rather than simply admired and placed delicately on bedside tables around the world. He has written 5 novels and may even be writing a 6th. And he asked if we might start this evening with a reading of something new, which has only had one previous reading, and that was in Auckland. So really, this is the world premiere. Just don't tell anybody. Sorry, Kiwi, sorry. So if we could welcome David, and you can head to the lectern.
Yeah, although my head's so big, I can't... Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for that amazing introduction. I just wish I'd been recording it. So on bad days when the black dog is on my trail, I could just replay it for myself and cheer myself up. So, hey, Geordie, maybe not from this one, but the new thing. Yeah. Okay, you got it. This is just a very, very short story. Friends putting together a compilation or an anthology of stories that can't be over 800 words long. It's actually about 935, but I'm from West Cork in Ireland, and he says, well, that can qualify as to West Cork 800. And I'll probably just jump straight in, I think. It's called An Inside Job. The track stops at the edge of the plantation at a gate and a view of the evening. Brooksy kills the engine. Are you quite sure you want to go through with this? Because I've got to say, this ain't the most foolproof plan you've ever thought of, you boy. I stub out my cigarette. It's an inside job. It's sweet as. All this cloak and dagger stuff, though, I mean, don't you? You're afraid of being my accomplice after all these years? Brooksy puffs out his cheeks. I'm here, aren't I? Down the sloping field, the 5 executive homes back onto a straggly copse. 1 ditch and a flimsy garden fence. There's ample cover and 0 protection. Really, a burglar couldn't have designed it better. My target's the big, fat property on the left side. Through my binoculars, I check their inn. Good. Oh, but that old fear's leaking into my bloodstream. It's like vodka. God, this almost feels like living again. So I get out of the 4x4. It's just like the old days, ain't it, Brooksy? He checks his $2,000 watch. Only I know how he got it. Not a lot, says my ex-corporal, if I'm honest with you. If Farmer Turnip spots a hooded man doing the whole SAS bit, there'd be a, "Get off my land!" and it would all go Pete Tong. So I stick to... Does Pete Tong make any sense in Australia? Yeah, you do. So I stick to the hedge, but otherwise act like a casual rambler. Brooksy's got my arse covered while I'm in the open, but Worcestershire's not Iraq. There's actually laws here. The only hitch happens in the copse when my claw gets caught in a tentacle of bramble. It takes a minute to unpick the bastard, but at least Brooksy can't see. Then I prise off the thin slats of the garden fence with my hunting knife, and I'm through. Park my arse on the garden house decking, it's hidden by a hedge, and text the message, "What homework you talking about?" to my inside operative. There. I watch the house while I wait. Lord Muck's framed by the kitchen window. He's washing up. I feel my old L96 back in my real 2 hands. Line up his domed head, gently squeeze the trigger. Wally the shrink says I mustn't. Own your anger, Owen. Princess is up in a bedroom, it's the top left. Windows open, curtains closed, trance shite booming out. Princess is too young for that druggy music, if you ask me. Our next she opens the back door, compost bowl in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the husband lottery is... There's 30 Ks worth of Toyota Land Cruiser around the side. She walks to the compost. A slithery thump. Looks my way like she knows I'm here and she's letting this happen. Suppose your inside operative grassed you off, you boy. But no, she goes in again. All's well, all's well, all's well. Civilians don't see what they're not expecting. I'm in thick shadow and the low sun's in her eyes. I've got a new winking burglar alarm, I see. It's classy enough to put off the amateur chancer. Me or Brooksy or any pro could disable it in our sleep. I'm thinking of resending my text. Oh, there's a young person in the audience. Hello, where are you? Oh, well, I can't see you, but you can tell your mum and dad you're allowed to make as much noise as you want because I've had young people too, and it's cool. Me or Brooksy or any pro could disable it in our sleep. I'm thinking of resending it, my text, when the patio door opens. And here he comes, all of 9 years old, down the path. That Wayne Rooney Man U shirt's the real McCoy, no doubt. What's that rusty creaking? Is it next door garden? My real fingers flick to my knife. Stop it. Christ's sakes. Stand and deliver, Agent Alpha Bravo, your money or your life. Hi, Dad, says Jimbo. What are you doing here? 2 hours round trip for... What are you doing here? I manufacture a jokey grin. Oh, it's great to see you too, Dad. You got my text earlier, didn't you? Look, I put my Terminator hand on for your special like. Jimbo accepts my awkward hug, but doesn't really hug back. But Mum and Chris, they say it's okay if you drop by whenever. Well, that's very, very nice of Mum and Chris. I shouldn't, but I can't stop myself. It's awfully, frightfully grown up of Mum and Chris, especially after Chris's lawyer put me through the shredder. But own your anger, Owen. I let Jimbo step back and give him a friendly shoulder slap with my claw. Come on, Adrian. This is more of a laugh than ringing the doorbell. Hey, do you remember the invincible shadows of Black Swan Green? I was 7 then, Dad. I still believed in Santa as well. I groped for a witty answer, but nothing's really to hand. Plus, it's a bit unfair on Jess. She'd like to see you too. Not a sentiment expressed by a princess the last time we met. I'll see her in a couple of weekends. It's just, Jess is, she's as stubborn as her mother and in love with the pony that Chris bought her. Jimbo looks at me, unwilling to help me out. Brooksy was right. This is stupid, but I've started now. I've got news. Man-to-man, face-to-face sort of news. Jimbo's got this new frown and way of saying, okay. Look, things haven't been easy since I hold up my claw in lieu of a long list of things I don't want to repeat. But you remember Uncle Brooksy? He's got me this job with the outfit he's working for now. That's good, says Jimbo with too much suspicion. Yeah, it's great, and so's the money. It's more than Chris earns. Great. Jimbo's waiting for the catch, the bright little bugger. It's with some security contractors who operate in hotspots. My son's cool drops away. You're never going back. Not to Iraq. No, not Iraq. But you've heard of Afghanistan, right? Jimbo's only 9, but the little sod's my judge. There's rooks. There's trance music and a far-off chainsaw.
What was so fantastic about getting that debut was that it indicates a thesis which is probably entirely wrong. The title of today's discussion is The Thousand Styles of David Mitchell. And as you heard, and if any of you have read The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, you will know the register, the cadence, the language, everything is different. Now, in the teens of the last century, there was an event which some people consider to be the kind of signal moment in modernist lit, when a Portuguese poet named Ferdinand Pessoa, which translates essentially into Ferdinand Person, decided he didn't exist. What he did was that this poet and writer decided that he was going to turn himself into a stage on which various constructions of himself would perform through language. He had many what he called heteronyms, and they had different names, different biographies, and different styles. Now, David Mitchell's his body of work has been characterized by an extraordinary variation in everything. The construction of each novel has been dazzlingly, startlingly new. I think I wanted to begin by asking David whether there are affinities or submerged links between your works, or whether that you do see yourself in relation to that great Portuguese poet and try and begin each work anew as a new person with a new voice.
Well, thanks for all the nice things you said about my writing in that, Geordie. It's all about a fear of turning into REM. It's not that they've ever lost the knack of writing good songs. It's just there's not much spacing between the albums, and it kind of feels like variations of Automatic for the People ever since then, which is a great album. But insofar as I write self-consciously, I do that. I do try to... if I'm writing something that feels like something I've already written before, then it's got to go. Even if it's working really well, whoops, there goes my mic. Like a partly reconstructed Cyberman here, with bits falling off me. And it might even be better in my fourth novel or in my would have been fourth novel than it was in my second, but I've already done that, and so I don't want to cheat the reader by delivering something that I've already done. I mean, of course there's a link between my work because it's all me. I don't hire someone or pay or outsource my novels. It's just an idea, actually, but not yet, anyway. And there is, and they sort of exist in the same universe, but style, I suppose style is in the name of the event, and I'd view it as maybe the most elusive of what I think of as the five elements of the novel, being, I feel like such a fool if I can't remember them now, plot, character, themes/ideas, structure, and style. I did that a few weeks ago, and someone said, well, what about place? And I said, well, that's included in... so maybe place is one of those trace elements that's sort of there, but it doesn't really fit into my grand scheme, so never mind. But style, yeah, what is it? It's sort of it's the recipe, it's sort of how you assemble all of the collected, right, sort of how you assemble the others. Of course, it's sort of linked with the language as well. Actually, my thesis is going to bits now, so just forget that I said that. Style, it's an elusive thing, but it is sort of the servant of the novel. So it's more a matter of, if this doesn't sound too flaky, kind of working out what style the novel wants to be written in and obeying its instruction.
Well, you see, this strikes me as a very old-fashioned idea, where the narrative comes first, and yet the modernist project has been one in which voice, that kind of the thumbprint of the authorial self, seems paramount. Are you conscious of having a kind of, a thing for narrative, which we celebrate, by the way? That's why we read the novels.
Well, it's why I read. However ingenious, however beautiful and never before done the style may be, I won't get through more than 50 pages unless I've been introduced to someone. It's a person first for me. It's the character, a character who I care about, and then sort of the possibility that bad things will happen to this person that I'm relating to is dangled in front of me. Unless that's happening, however ingenious the rest of it might be, it feels a bit sterile. That's sort of the meat and potatoes of what we do, of narrative, of story. This odd assemblage, this construction that for some reason Homo sapiens thinks via. Am I making any sense, or is this a jet-lag garble? Because I'm starting to feel it.
You're not only making perfect sense, but David just described, in fact, what makes his most recent novel, The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, so addictive as a text. It's not just a marvel of the author's imagination. It is populated by living, breathing creatures with anxieties and fears and traps that they fall into, and loves that they're cut off from, and move, humans that move from innocence into experience. The bare outlines, for those of you who haven't yet read it, and I do beg you to go out and read it as a matter of urgency. We're in 1799, on the cusp of great change. The secular New World Order is upon the West, and the English, as a great maritime force in Asia, are coming. But Japan ignores the outside world. It is a closed shop, an absolutely mysterious an impermeable culture. They, of necessity, must have some contact with the outside world, but that must be limited to the smallest amount possible. And it's very apt that we should be sitting here on the former docks where this working harbour used to have its heart, because it is in a place called Dejima, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Fine, yeah.
Which is essentially a sort of a floating island, or an island off the city of Nagasaki, which I gather still exists in very much its original form.
It's been reconstructed. The shoreline's moved away a few hundred metres, so it's now sort of in a moat. But this is such a lovely description. Please don't let me interrupt you. I wish I could do this when a taxi driver says, "So what's your book about then?" But this is gold. So please.
So to cut to the chase, Jacob de Zoet is a young clerk with the East India Company. He has been obliged to come out to make his fortune in the world. He's from a good, solid Protestant family, but he needs to make some money because his loved one has a father who has very sound financial instincts and tells him to go off for 7 years, and when he comes back with his fortune, he can have his daughter. But once Jacob gets to this island, he discovers that not only do the Japanese fear and dislike the Westerners, with some small and honourable exceptions, but the Westerners themselves are divided, corrupt, vile in many respects. He finds himself in his role as someone who's meant to audit the books, trapped between the greed of his superiors and the necessity of acting in accordance with his own very strong principles of what is right and decent. And it's this gap between his own vision of how a man comports himself and how the world tends to crush those kind of people, from which the great drama of the novel is generated. There's so much more in it than that, but it is a world that is brought to life and yet is very much removed from us. I'd like to ask you, what struck me most about the book was the sense that the writing was vivid, and yet the milieu, the world it describes, is removed in time to such a degree that to use the language in which these people may have spoken would be to revert to pastiche. So what are you doing? Are you violating the kind of accuracy of the historical moment in order to give vigour and contemporary energy to your work? Or are you being obedient to it? And are they impossible to do simultaneously?
Language is the big tricky thing about a historical novel, because you can't win. It's like translation. But instead of translating from one language to another, we're translating from the past to the present, and you can't win. If you do as I did at first and spent 6 months doing comb contemporary journals and accounts, I did Byron's letters, Smollett's novels. Smollett's great, by the way, if you don't know Smollett. I thought all my life he was this starchy old 18th century guy. He's really naughty and ribald, so do check Smollett out. Smollett, Fielding, Richardson. And every time I'd meet a word or a phrase, I'd write them down and kind of ingest them, and then wrote in that mode. And it was perfect, but it was Blackadder. Everyone was speaking like Blackadder. You can't do thou art as a 21st century writer and not expect your reader to go. And then, of course, a beautiful shimmering bubble of fiction gets popped, and you got mess all over your face. So if you ignore that and then write in sort of language we're using now, that's no good either, because it sounds like Seinfeld. It's a sort of again, the bubble of fiction gets popped because it's too new and modern. Nah, they wouldn't have used that word then because I didn't use it when I was a kid. So you have to, as so often, you have to find the least worst solution, which for me was, well, the invention of a dialect, I think, of Bygonese. It's not actually as people spoke, because that's Blackadder, but it's plausibly how we think, if we don't think about it too much, how we think people would have spoken then. If it's quite a modern innovation, so instead of if, you use the subjunctive, so instead of if you see her, say hello, it's were you to see her, say hello. Shall more than will, a bit haphazardly maybe. Avoid got, avoid modern contractions. Yeah, and then of course you've got to subdivide it, because you can't have everyone in this novel with a large cast. They can't all speak the same, because that in itself pops the beautiful bubble of fiction. So sort of you have to have a Bygonese for the British, Bygonese for the Dutch, Bygonese for the Japanese. Then you have to have a Bygonese for the educated classes, a Bygonese for the oiks. In Japanese, men and women speak in a somewhat different way, and I wanted to represent that. So you've got Bygonese for the male Japanese characters, Bygonese for the female Japanese characters. What was I doing? Why did I start this bloody novel? Why didn't I just write about a Scandinavian detective with supernatural powers? I must have been mad.
How long did it take you?
4 years, and I went wrong twice and had to jettison a couple of years' work and lie to my editor and don't worry, it's coming. Oh God, I'd like to say sort of it almost finished me off before I finished it off. It was touch and go there.
But was it a sense that you felt, right, okay, I've got to notch up my ambition, I have to test myself, because it sounds to me this immensely complex?
Not really. I just wanted to write about Dejima, this odd, weird place, this cat flap between two worlds, where the terms were so not what white Europeans in Asia or anywhere were used to, sort of just kept there on this walled island. Not allowed to slowly take over the country. They were kept in check there. And sort of fear, xenophobia from the Japanese, but also strange admiration isn't quite the right word, but strange understanding that in the long term this place would prove to be a lifeline. I sometimes think of a modern comparison, which I can't really, but if you imagine a spaceship landing in the English context, it would be Hull. What is the Hull of Australia? What kind of a half-joke town?
I better not say it.
It's a bit dangerous. Yeah, you might not leave alive. But yeah, if you imagine a somewhat different race of humanoids arrived, and yeah, we've got nuclear fusion cracked, and yeah, cancer. You guys are still dying of cancer. And they've got these secrets that we've been after forever. They're almost mythical philosopher's stones. But the Dutch had them in medicine, metallurgy, the arts of war, navigation, science, Newtonian, the Enlightenment, in a word, and all of the discoveries that the Enlightenment brought. The Dutch had them, and so there is this fear and xenophobia and a sense of racial superiority. I mean, that's as old as the hills, and you find it everywhere. But also this sort of, well, this envy, this need, this idea that you know things we don't. So I found out about Dejima. I thought back then, years ago, 16 years ago, that I wasn't a writer then, I hadn't been published, but I thought if I couldn't write if I couldn't find a halfway decent novel in that, then I wouldn't be much of a writer. But it was a lot harder than I thought it would have, than I thought it was going to be.
But you do allow the Japanese some points in this. There are legitimate anxieties about the world that the Dutch and the English are set to inaugurate.
Oh, dead
and
right.
that throughout the novel, especially through Jacob, who still, operates with this sort of quasi-religious conscience, which is almost physically, in the text with that the Bible. A religious work that he smuggles in. You're not allowed Christian texts into Japan because that's the ultimate corruption, of course. But there's a lot of anxiety that's expressed throughout the novel about bodies in a secularized world. Is this all we are? Just, bundles of flesh? Is a life only the kind of, the acts that constitute it? That there's nothing sort of deeper. And in fact, you allow your moral centre of the novel, Dr. Marinus, to have this exchange with Jacob. Jacob contemplates the details and the devil plants a seed. What if this engine of bones, the seed germinates, is a man's entirety? Wind wallops the walls like a dozen tree trunks tumbling, and divine love is a mere means of extracting baby engines of bones. And he puts this to Dr. Marinus. He said, where's the soul? Pointing to a skeleton that they're taking apart because Marinus is a surgeon. And Marinus replies, the soul is a verb, not a noun. And it just seemed to me a very beautiful statement, and one that perhaps had some larger, kind of significance in your own ideas.
I'm afraid that's about as large as I get, Geordie. Well, it was the it was a question at the heart of the Enlightenment project, and it's still with us and still pretty much unanswered. What is the soul? It's a mystery, and it's a mystery because there's no answer, and the best you can do is rephrase the question in such a way that a glint of different light might come in from a different direction, which is the verb and noun stuff.
Is that a virtue of historical fiction that allows you to ask questions which, in a sense, become so embedded in our, that it seems naive to ask, but if we return back in time, we're permitted to ask them in that larger context yet again?
Yeah, I guess so. Historical fiction does give you a license that maybe you couldn't be so free with if you're writing something set now. Yeah.
But speaking of books set now, your other historical novel, almost, is Black Swan Green, and this is the work that precedes The Thousand Autumns, and it is as different from The Thousand Autumns as it is from the early novels, which are maximalist in style and extravagant, as I've earlier explained. But Black Swan Green is an oddity. It is, with a few flickers of weirdness, it is defiantly ordinary. It seems to me that it trembles on the edge of not being fiction at all, and I've never actually heard you outline just how much is yours and how much is invented. Could you tell us, how does this text operate in the context of your body of work?
It's about 38.6% straight, and the rest is invented. Me and the protagonist would have much DNA in common. The stage is also born from life, which you can't mess around with that much, actually, because other people would have lived on the same stage as well, just growing up in a nowhere little village in England, but kind of anywhere in the early 1980s with the threat of nuclear war, sort of just on the edge of your bad dreams and Thatcheronomics, as opposed to Rogernomics, which is a word I just learnt the other day from New Zealand. Thatcheronomics happening there as well, and people who had never been unemployed in their lives all of a sudden being unemployed. So that's sort of drawn pretty much from life. But My mum and dad were much nicer people, and so far as we know, my dad didn't sire a love child on a secretary at work, which is something that, that's a spoiler, isn't it? But I'm sorry, I've forgotten your question. Sorry, what was the question again?
Well, I think we're probably better served looking at it from further back in time. It seems, I wonder whether you spent a bit of time in England for a period preceding the writing of Black Swan Green. I wonder if place really does sort of seep into the groundwater, because wasn't it during your time in Japan that your imagination was informed by that experience? Your maximalist period.
I love that word, by the way.
No, I just want to keep on saying it.
It's a great word, yeah. Maximalist. I must store that away.
Seems to correspond with a time when you were in another place entirely. Could you tell us a little bit about how Japan actually affected the way you write, if indeed it did at all?
I can, but I can't do so without using the word stuff a lot. So can I use the word stuff a lot in my answer? You're right, and you need stuff. And your stuff either comes from your memory and your fund of experience. And that's a finite fund. Or can I use pipes as well as stuff? It's piped in from your immediate environment, what's around you. Went for a walk around the harbour this morning with a friend, and just pipe in stuff. Kind of the sea looked unironed, just the water. That's quite nice, unironed water. Yeah, I'll kind of put that in my stuff bank. And then the sun hit the water at a certain angle, like bits of mirrors. There was a guy playing Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire on a ukulele, and he looked ridiculous, and he was out of tune. Now, you can't make that stuff up. You can only see it. You can only find it. And often the found stuff is the best stuff. If you happen to be in Japan, then all of the stuff you find will be Japanese stuff. And that's almost why not write a novel set in Japan that utilises that stuff, because it's there, it's to hand. So the place you're in does affect what you're writing insofar as that is your chief supplier of stuff. You've also got the media. These days you've got the internet. I mean, you can write a novel about 18th century Japan whilst living in 21st century southwestern Ireland. Of course, demonstrably, this goes on all the time. It's not that you can't, but it makes things convenient if you write about where you are at any one time. Yeah, that answer your question?
Absolutely. But it does strike me that you are part of a generation who have been involved in a mysterious offshore movement. And I think of figures, well, it's elder statesmen, it's someone like James Hamilton Paterson, but there's Jeff Dyer, there's Tim Parks, there's Alan Thorpe. You're all, incredibly gifted writers who have decided to leave the UK and go elsewhere. Is there a reason for this? Do you not like the UK?
Yeah, there's a very, very ludicrously simple reason. It's called cheap flights. You don't have to be one of the toffs to travel widely anymore at all. A friend was saying the disadvantage of emigrating to Australia in the 1970s was that once you were here,
couldn't get back.
You couldn't you were stuck, which was something that the original emigrants 200 years ago would have said the same for a slightly different reason, but not really for a slightly different reason. Whereas that's no longer true. Hop on a plane and away you go, and as long as you're middle class upwards and have access to that kind of that income bracket, it's not difficult to do, nor is it particularly brave or grown up. But there's that, and probably the phenomena of the festival as well. We do get to see the world's most beautiful, the most beautiful corners of the world's most beautiful corners, and that wasn't an advantage that Hemingway had. You know, a couple of generations ago, you had to join the army and nearly get shot to see what life was like on a Pacific island in 1946. But now there's probably a festival somewhere near. Just ask a publicist. It's really blasé, isn't it? I'm sure the number of novels about writers who wake up on night flights, not quite sure where they're going this time. Is it Auckland this time? Where am I going? It's probably increased over time.
I think I'll have to open it to the floor in a moment. I just wanted to ask you one more question.
Sure, Geordie.
Recently, the American novelist Richard Powers was being interviewed, and he was being kind of, needled about the relationship between kind of fiction and non-fiction. And his response was something along the lines of, look, it's just not important. He said the real division in literature now is between a literature that acknowledges interdependence and a literature that closes down and denies interdependence. And sitting here on the stage and listening to you talk about even Black Swan Green, which seems to be a kind of traditional novel set in its place, cosy as the Shires, it's actually not, is it? Embedded in it is this sense of what is going on, off the coast of Argentina, a war of choice, and some pretty global tensions seep into the narrative. So are you conscious of interdependence being, part of your project?
Such a stunningly intelligent thing to say that I have no idea how I can follow it up with anything equally stunningly intelligent. Wow, I really like that. He said that. Clever guy. Interdependence, yeah.
Asking the hard question is easy. Who said that, Auden?
I don't know, I'm sorry. There's nothing in what you just said I can disagree with. I suppose I think of what it actually makes me think of is a flippant boast that I heard from an 18-year-old recently who boasted that I'm not interested in politics, and as if this was an admirable thing, as if politics was only of interest for nerds and geeks and policy wonks. It's something that I'm sure this young person will sort of look back and think, I shouldn't have said that. And 98% of what I said when I was 18, if I can remember it, makes me cringe now. However, my mental retort was that you might not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you, all right. What's in your wallet, who you can sleep with, whether you have a car or not, whether you have a job or not. It's politics. It's everywhere. It's not just on TV in Westminster or whichever building your state happens to be governed from. It's right there in your bed as well. That is my rephrasing of Mr. Powers. Mr. Powers is more intelligently put remark about interdependency. The world is a web, and that's what makes it so fascinating as well. Islands are getting fewer and fewer. They're probably never there in the first place, but the links become more apparent and more obvious when button can be pushed in Hong Kong and a factory gets closed in Sydney, and the economy goes down here, and China hoovers in money, raw materials, so the Aussie dollar goes up. So you have great holidays, but if you're exporting, boy, you're in trouble. I love this stuff. Yeah.
But this is what seems so extraordinary, because think about this. David's first novel precedes Google, I think, and yet it anticipates. It's like a random website. It's a random website generator. All right, enough of that. I'll let you ask some really mean questions now. Now, I gather, on either side, there are microphones set up, And if I could ask you, because we're being recorded in every possible way, or are there microphones available to people on each side?
So this is a question about, hi.
Hi.
So lovely to hear you talk, beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much. It's nice to hear you talk too. So go for it.
I was so struck by your first novel because it opens up with this short story set in, I think it's Japan, the first country, and then it moves to Hong Kong, and all the stories all lead into each other. And I was just I just adored the way that you were able to do that. And so I just have this question. Did you start off with different stories that you tried to interconnect, or did you always have this plan that they were all going to interconnect with each other?
Sure, thank you very much for your question. I was on a sort of six-month break from work, and I travelled from Japan on the Trans-Siberian to China, back to Moscow and the UK. And when you travel, here's a good tip. If you walk into a restaurant and you're on your own and just say, "Can I have a table for one, please?" then you're going to get put in a corner like a real sad sack, and you feel like a sad sack. Take out a notebook, however, and just watch the service just go through the roof. You get bigger portions, you get everything. You're there with a pen. And so I'd record sort of my memories of the day as a sort of kind of textual photographs to myself in my notebook, and ideas, and the guy with the ukulele singing "Ring of Fire," just stuff, sort of the stuff I had trawled that day, and it coagulates into plot. So. First 3 stories or so I wrote as independent standalone stories, just not knowing what I'd do with them. But then I realised by about the 3rd or 4th they were all. It's sort of how you find, or how I find, theme and ideas. If you're French and in the 1960s, you have to start with the theme and ideas, and the plot and the character and the other elements are the vehicle for those. However, for me, I kind of find them. Stumble over them, and each of the stories was a different answer to the question, why do things happen? And once I'd worked that out, then, well, what other answers are there? Why do things happen? Sort of fate, whatever that is, chance, history, greed, the abdication of the will, quantum physics. They're all different answers to why do things happen. And so once I got, this is what the book's about, thank you, now I know what I'm writing about. It's a nice quote from Picasso, which is, first I find something, then I go looking for what it is. And I'm not kind of comparing myself to Picasso, but that's sort of a little bit how it feels for me when I write. So, yeah, that is the creation story behind my first novel. Thanks for your question.
I think there's a gentleman waiting up there at the microphone. So.
Hello. Thank you for that. Most fascination. Could I ask an extension from your last answer?
Sure.
How much travel have you done in Australia, and have you come across materials or stories that could inspire you to write some books in relation to Australia?
Thank you very much. Well, actually, yeah. There's this guy playing the ukulele. But actually enough, I'm only half joking. That's kind of how it starts. It's a little seed. What's the word? Stem cell. You kind of find a little delicious. Ooh, you look unfoldable. And what's he doing there? Why Johnny Cash? Is it the tourists? Is he an undercover surveillance guy? Is the mother of all disguises? So impossibly, I don't know, etc., etc. So these questions can unfold. I travelled here about 11, 12 years ago with my girlfriend as a scuzzy backpacker. Well, I was scuzzy, she wasn't, but I was scuzzy. And we stayed in hostels and went around the country. I got some great memories from that. And that's really when I really saw your country, in a way, more so than now. Now I kind of see a particular niche of the country really well, but not the country at large. Australia is fascinating for Europeans, maybe particularly for British ones. It's more than just another country, more than just another state. I've got a theory that any one given culture has another culture that, well, I can't think of the right word, perhaps because there isn't one, but there's another culture that has a particularly strong hold on the collective cultural imagination of culture A, which is the clumsiest sentence I've said in a long, long time, but hopefully you kind of know what I mean. And I think for Brits, it's probably Australia. It's sort of so far away and so sun-drenched it isn't important that the myth is 90% myth. It's just important that it's a powerful myth. So I would like to write about Australia one day. It kind of creeps into most of my work, actually. Even in this last one, there's a bit of a backstory that's set here. In fact, right here, where we are right now. And so you never know one of these days, but you live in a very interesting place.
In the great tradition of convicts somehow finding their way back to other countries to make a lot of money.
They do need to get out, otherwise it's not much of a story. Get stuck and kind of stay and die. It does bring things to a sudden end. So yeah, that's probably why they generally spring themselves one way or another.
Sir.
Hello, David. Massively enjoyed your books.
Thank you very much.
And what I found so amusing reading through them were the found links between different books where characters would reappear in an often surprising way. And it's a two-part question. One, what was your aim in doing that? Was it for personal amusement? Was it to gift your avid readers so they could find links? Was it for greater illumination? Because you said at the beginning that you felt it would be cheating to do the same thing twice.
Yeah.
And the second part of the question is, why did you stop in the last book?
Great, well, thank you. Answer one to part one. I do it because, it does amuse me. But you can trust the reader within. In fact, the reader within is probably your best informant. I mean, the reader within is probably why you start writing in the first place. And generally what you like to find in a book as a reader will also be what other readers enjoy finding in your own books. For amusement, for monomaniacal reluctance to let go of people who I've spent more time with than my own flesh and blood family. Don't go. I sort of view my characters like unemployed old ham actors in a job centre, and they're sort of waiting for a sort of like little file card to be put up in the window, wanted, and if they will fit chronologically in their own fictional lives, and I do think about, well, I at least interview them for the job. It's sounding like multiple personality disorder. I've also sort of got a theory about, if I was Richard Powers, I could do this really meatily, but transferable concreteness, by which I mean, if you've met a character in another book and believed they were real and believed that world was real, and then you encounter that character in book B, then the character from book A will kind of transfer the concreteness of the reality from that, and they bring luggage with them and kind of spill it in the new book, and it makes it more real and real in a different way, I think. Isn't a new idea. Nothing's really a new idea, but I sometimes think of Shakespeare. You've got Falstaff in the history plays, and then he appears again because the Queen liked him in The Merry Wives of Windsor. If he only ever appeared in The Merry Wives of Windsor, yeah, great play, it's Shakespeare, you can't knock that, but you know where he's been, you know how he dies, you know he imbues that play with poignancy and sadness, otherwise just kind of as a Benny Hill romp, it probably wouldn't really have. And I think there's something in that theory, even though I could never prove it on live TV. Part 2. Aha! Well, actually, in 1,000 Autumns of James, available at all the bookshops now, there's about 4 links that I'm happy to see you've missed. They aren't in your face, so don't feel embarrassed, even though I just made a whole theatre full of people laugh at you. And still, thanks for asking a question which I don't really deserve. But there's a character in Cloud Atlas who's a sea captain. He appears in the last few pages. There's a cat from Black Swan Green. And there's 1 or 2 others which I forget. And there's a character in this who will be in the book that I just read from.
But I wouldn't know that, would I?
No, you wouldn't. No, that's fair. Yeah. I deserved that, yeah. Thanks very much for your question.
I'm very sorry. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Unless it's very quick.
Yeah, go on. It takes real nerve to stand up and then just to be battered down again.
Absolutely. Sorry. Yeah. Have you got something really, really quick?
Yeah, go on.
Well, sort of quick. I really loved Cloud Atlas, and that's how I came to discover your books.
Thank you.
I loved the sort of expansive and maximalist reach of it. I wanted to ask you, David, would you say that all the individual stories of Cloud Atlas are about power and about how there's always the possibility of the resistance against power and power relations?
Thank you, and yes. I was talking about Ghostwritten earlier and this found theme of causality. The found theme of Cloud Atlas is predacity, how one unit will prey upon another, a tribe on another tribe, an individual on another individual, a company on its employees, a section of the state on the public, one country on another. Yeah, that's the found theme of the book. And once I worked that out, it made it easy to make sense of for me as I wrote it. I will keep this short because we're probably going over, but thanks for your question.
Thank you very much, everybody. It was an absolutely brilliant hour. It's a great honour and a great pleasure. And if we just one final round of applause for David. Thank you.